Peggy and Frank, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Let's jump right in. Both of you deal with a lot of companies that either have an AI strategy or they want an AI strategy. Let's start with the misconceptions. When you're talking with people, it's like, if somebody doesn't quite get it, what does that look like? What does that sound like? Peggy, let's start with you.
Well, we just got back from Davos. We had a big group there from Microsoft, and over a period of about 3 days, we probably saw 70 of our partners and customers. It was sort of rapid fire. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions, and maybe spun a little bit by Davos, because AI was a theme there. It was on every poster. It didn't matter if you were a corporate or an NGO or a government, you had AI somewhere in your poster. So our partners were coming in the door saying, what do I need to know? Tell me right now. And I think a misconception is somehow AI is fairy dust that you can just sprinkle over your company and sprouts will happen and you'll get growth. And
so it's not that?
It's not, yes, surprisingly. And I think we just had to do a little bit of a reset and say, look, let's take a step back, understand that AI runs on data. So first and foremost, you should know what kind of data you have, what data you have access to, and maybe what other data pools that you can merge with your data that you can then reason across and surface insights. Okay. So there's a little bit of a misconception, and I think a little bit of a anxiety around, is it coming for me, and I must already be behind. And so we just wanted to sort of do a reset and ground them back in reality.
That's great. And what about you, Frank? And I should mention, if you haven't seen it, Frank has a deck online. It's half an hour. It is one of the best primers I've ever seen on just sort of understanding AI. So when you're talking to people, what are the biggest misconceptions?
Yeah, let me add on to what Peggy shared, which is I see startups all day long. My job is to meet with entrepreneurs who are going to change the world. And maybe 2 years ago, I started seeing AI sort of seep into every single presentation of a startup CEO. And it's not fairy dust. Like, the question I'll always ask is, how are you using the very best machine learning or AI techniques to solve a business problem? And now the CEOs will be like, oh, I'm not really sure what algorithms we're using. I'm sure we're using the good ones. And so, look, it's not fairy dust. It is a set of computer science techniques that, if harvested well, can really solve problems that we weren't able to solve before. And you just have to be judicious about it. Now, the good news for people who are not in startup land is you read all these stories about how Google and Microsoft and Amazon are sort of paying NBA-style salaries for the very best machine learning people. And while there is fierce competition at the very, very top of the market, and that's great and healthy, and gee, I wish I was a PhD student again, you can make a lot of progress in your own business by retraining an existing software engineer, right? Take an existing software engineer or data analyst, somebody who can write Excel macros, you put them in a Udacity class, 6 weeks later, they can do some serious damage on business problems that you have in your organization right now.
And Peggy, you're dealing with a lot of companies, you do a lot of deals and establish partnerships. We've talked about the bad movie version of this. Let's talk about the good movie version. You've got, I assume, a framework, a checklist in your head. What does that look like as you're getting into those conversations? Okay, I'm going to keep talking. What does that look like? What's your framework?
Yeah, so I think, understanding your data, we definitely, as I talked about, ask our partners to do that. I think, as Frank says, I don't think you need to have a whole set of AI data scientists in your house. There's tools out there that can do that. And I don't think you even need access to or you need access to the data, but you don't need to it doesn't need to be all yours. And you can also get data in ways you may not even realize. Perhaps you've just built a mobile app, or you're starting to move workloads into the cloud. You can put instrumentation in those things and start to gather data that you didn't have before and look at the data from that perspective. Or maybe you've just outfitted sensors in your factory. These are spewing all sorts of data. And it's not just data when a temp has hit a certain degree and you say, oh no, I've got to get out there. It's all the data leading up to that. You can actually glean insights from that. And even small amounts of data can be useful if you have the right tools to assess it. So I think the framework is, it's it's not easy to solve some of these problems, but there are tools out there, and there are ways to get at them and surface these insights that can be very, very impactful to businesses. Super impactful.
That's great. Frank, what's your...
Yeah, so I'm a little self-conscious of, we've got James from McKinsey right after us, and if you want frameworks, McKinsey's got frameworks. But let me try a couple. So framework one is thinking about the product life cycle. The product life cycle is, what do I build? And then how do I price it? And how do I make customers aware that I've got this product? And then how do I support it, right? So that's the product life cycle. AI can make every single one of those phases better and smarter. You can pick better products to build. You can pick optimal pricing. You can support your customers better. Kai-Fu talked about how AIs will eventually be better customer support agents than most humans who get cranky right before lunch. And so that's one framework to think about, which is what do I develop, and then how do I move customers through the entire life cycle. Another framework that is helpful is, what are your corporate objectives? What are the big things that you're working on this year? Your leadership has set a set of goals. We want to be better in this area. We want to double down in this region. We want to really be more effective against this competitor. Whatever those things are, you can also bring AI to sort of help those objectives. And so there's lots of ways to think about, how do I inject sort of this set of computer science techniques into my business objectives? And eventually it will not seem like fairy dust and magical. Eventually it will seem like database technology, right? So relational databases were brand new in the 1980s, and it had a bit of this, SQL? Good God, SQL is magic. How can you do stuff like that? And then AI is rapidly becoming like that. It's less magical seeming and more just, well, of course you're going to use AI techniques in writing software. Like, why would you not? It would be like not having a mobile app or not having a database. So it's just the latest set of things that computer science has invented that will get into every mainstream business application we write.
And what about smaller companies? I mean, big companies have the resources to invest a ton. If you're a smaller company, what are you supposed to do?
Well, so we have a great story on this. We were working with Fujitsu, who's been a long time customer of Microsoft's, and they are involved in the agricultural business in Japan, and they were working with Japanese dairy farmers. And here was their problem. They needed to know exactly when cows are in heat so that they can inseminate them. And it's actually a little tricky business to know exactly. And it's actually very manual, and without going into a lot of detail, it takes several hours to figure out about when you think this cow is exactly at the point where you can inseminate them. And the problem is, when they did inseminate the cows, it only worked about 50% of the time. So it was time consuming, it was costly, they would miss the cycle, they have to try again next month, and then of course they've got hundreds of cows. So what do? So we're talking dairy farmers in Japan. Most don't have huge herds, so small dairy farmers in Japan, and Fujitsu and Microsoft and the dairy farmers got together, and we kind of puzzled on the project for a while. And the farmers said, well, one thing we notice is they kind of start to get antsy when they're in heat. And we're like, what does that mean, get antsy? And they say, they walk around a little bit more. So we put pedometers on the cows, just like this, I don't know what the pedometer was, but like a Fitbit type of thing that's connected. And we were able to start to analyze that data. And we realized they did, in fact, walk faster and faster to the point when it was exactly the right time to inseminate the cow. And so now the pedometer tells the farmer when to go out and do that. They don't have to spend hours in the corral with the cow. And the success rate is 95%. Like, they've just nailed it. And that is something that's been hugely impactful to the farmers. It gave them hours back in their day every month. And so even a small dairy farm in Japan can benefit from it. And it wasn't vast amounts of data, but it was finding the right algorithm, right, tuning it, understanding what it meant, and then putting it into action.
Right. But maybe the cows are going to get together and sort of say, let's mess up their algorithm.
Yeah, let's start dancing around. Let's walk real slow today.
Yeah, exactly. So Frank, Peggy just set a high bar in terms of AI story, which...
All right, the only way I'm going to be able to counter is with quantity. All right, so here we go.
What are some interesting AI applications you've seen lately?
So let me give 3 examples. First, I'll share another Japanese farm story, and the New York Times actually wrote this up. There's a guy named Makiko Koike, and he worked in the auto industry and sort of got tired of it and went home. And his family were cucumber farmers. Mm-hmm. And at the end of every harvest, his mom would have to sort the cucumbers into 16 different grades of cucumbers, because the Japanese are very particular about their produce, and so the shape and size and color and sheen and all of these things. And he wondered if he could build an AI-powered cucumber sorter. And he did, and the magical thing about this, so he, sort of Raspberry Pi computer, actuators that were very inexpensive. He used machine learning on the cloud. Sorry, Peggy, he used Google's. But under $2,000, he built himself a cucumber sorter. Now, this would have been possible, even in the 80s, but it might have cost $25 million. And you really need the PhD students to do it. So under $2,000, he's got himself a cucumber sorter. So I love stories like that. So what's the cucumber sorter in your organization? Which is for under $2,000. If you need something done like that, the tools make it possible now. Right. Another great example that I like, this one is from our portfolio, is a company called Zipline. And what they build is they build drones that can deliver very lightweight packages. And it's basically a self-flying drone. And what they're doing first is they're delivering blood in Western Rwanda. Blood is incredibly valuable, right? The right blood type literally can save somebody's life, and it's very light, so great for drones. And so they use AI to get the drone to the right place. They drop it off by parachute, and they are literally saving lives every hour. And the funny story is the doctors in Rwanda who sort of first experience this, they sort of punch up the blood type they need and how much, and then literally 45 minutes later, the blood drops out of the sky. Huh? And their first reaction to it was, it's as if Jesus Christ himself was delivering blood to me. And then a month later, where's my blood? It's late. Where's my blood? It's the new normal. All of a sudden, blood dropping from the sky of just the right type to save your patient's life is the new normal.
That's great. That's great. And so how do you both think about the hype that's around AI? Imagine when you go to social gatherings, dinner parties, both of you are probably the center of attention. And
always.
But there's probably a little bit of, how do you make sense of the hype meter, right? It's like AI is going to change everything, but it's not. So
I like to ground it again, because there is quite the hype meter out there. And some of the examples aren't the sexiest. Like, this is a great example, but other examples that we've been working with that have really been impactful to businesses, I try to switch the conversation to the impact that it can have just on your existing business, and kind of keep it in that sphere. One of the things we did recently is we worked with Rolls-Royce, who has aircraft engines, about 13,000 of them all over the world. They've been in the business for 20 years, and they have been providing their customers with analytics data from those aircraft engines. All was working fine until a certain point in time when those engines are just throwing off immense amounts of data. There's sensors all over these things. And that was good for their business, because then they could say, well, now I can sense this, I can sense that, and their customers like that. But then it got to the point where there was so much data, they're unable to manage all of it. And so another company that we worked with then to say, okay, let's do a reset, let's look at all this data. The only way that you can do it is with AI and with finely tuned algorithms, because it became too much for a human to understand. But what they were able to do is not only just give sort of the red alerts of things that were going on, but the predictive maintenance now. That's so much a part of their business. So they actually have a new way of doing business and interacting with their customers through a predictive maintenance service. And they can say, by the way, in the next week, you need to bring this particular engine back to the shop and get it tuned up, that they weren't able to before. And so I try to refocus it on the impact that you can have in your existing business, and without sort of boiling the ocean, saying, okay, what data do you have, and how can we look at it and glean insights from it?
Any thoughts?
Yeah, so there is a lot of hype, because hype sells papers. So there's two narratives.
And your point is?
There's two narratives that you'll often read about in the papers, because these are very sexy headlines. So narrative one is the robots are coming for your jobs, and employment is going to zero. And look, I'm an optimist on these things. We have been predicting the demise of labor with every automation technology we've invented. We predicted it with the tractors. We predicted it. Go back and read the stories of what, when Intel shipped the first CPU, the 4004, and basically the headlines were like, oh, all white collar work is doomed. Like, go back and read the coverage. This was literally the coverage around the 4004. We think about like spreadsheets. People are like, oh, now that we have spreadsheets, we won't need accountants. ATMs. Once we have ATMs, we won't need bank tellers. The reality is that with both bank tellers and financial analysts, post the automation, the spreadsheets and the ATMs, we have more of those people. And so our ability to predict what happens when automation enters the workplace, I think, is kind of limited. It's very easy to see what jobs will go, and I don't think we have to be mindful that there are a set of jobs that, as Kai-Fu said, will sort of quickly vanish, and we need to get out in front with education. We need to get out in front with retraining. We should do a big rethink of what we teach our kids starting in kindergarten, right? All of the what I learned in kindergarten skills are going to be super valuable in the AI-powered world, right? It's empathy. It's getting along with people. It's generosity of spirit. It's thinking outside of the box. It's thinking creatively. All of those things are not AI-powered today, right? There's no good AI systems that can do any of those things like collaborate and be empathetic. On the other hand, we have AI systems that are extremely good at predicting whether you have cancer given a radiology scan. So maybe we should stop training those things that are more mechanical and really shift to training the things that our kids will need in the new workplace. That's good.
And just in defense of the home team, I think the Times coverage has been pretty well calibrated.
Yes.
I know you were talking about other papers.
Other papers, sensationalist papers.
Nuanced, thoughtful, sophisticated. I know you're going to have a ton of questions. Just one last one from me. We were talking last night a lot about predictions. So 5 years from now, and AI is sort of moving in dog year speed, right? For every year, we've kind of got 7 years of progress. So 5 years from now, if we're sitting on the stage, what are we going to be talking about in terms of AI?
You know, I think there will be some impactful outcomes that'll affect all of us. You know, you mentioned, you know, research, cancer research, things like that. There's an interesting company we're working with right now, Adaptive Biotechnologies, to try to map the immune system. Like autoimmune diseases in particular are very challenging to diagnose and to figure out how to treat them. And so we're working with them to just understand them better. And actually, I was talking to our family doctor about this, and he said, I feel like we're just around the corner from understanding it. And I'm thinking, because he only sees such a small set of it, and there's no way with the set of data that he can see, unless maybe he stumbles upon it, right, what an outcome could be. But if we get these massive amounts of data together and reason across them, I think in 5 years we're going to say, wow, remember when we didn't understand autoimmune diseases? It could be, we're that close, and just with this latest push, it could get us there. So some of these big challenges that we have, climate change, things like that, now with AI and big data, we can put those together in a recipe that I think will have some very palpable impact in 5 years.
That's great. Right.
One of the things I'm really looking forward to is having more and more self-driving cars on the road. And in 5 years, I don't think we're actually going to be at the point where it's the majority of miles, but maybe 10 years. The majority of miles will be I'm driven everywhere as opposed to I'm driving my own car. And the sort of second and third order effects of that are amazing. So think all the DMVs close because we don't have to issue driver's licenses. Think on the disease front, so we're going to need to find a new source for organ donors because there's going to be no DUI accidents, and a third of all organ supply comes from, unfortunately, car accidents. Well, if we don't have car accidents, we're not going to have a ready supply of organ donors. So there's so many second and third order effects that come from, wow, like I'm just driven everywhere, and we take humans off the road. So I'm looking forward to that.
Good. Any cow predictions? Questions? I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
There we go. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Zena Ugrinsky with Booz Allen Hamilton. So for those of us who spend our careers helping the C-suite figure this out, whether it was, I don't know, BI in the beginning and ERP and now we're in AI and machine learning. How do we accelerate the path to adoption? And I know we're going to be speaking a lot about this, the workforce, the skills reset or enhancement, if you will. But what are the things that these people can do tomorrow to start thinking about their business problems differently and how to apply this? So going back to your comment about today, somebody with $2,000 can build a cucumber sort, right? I mean, what is the analogy? How do we best communicate this across our peers? Thanks.
Who'd like to start? Frank, why don't you start?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the best analogy, but one that my partner Benedict Evans uses is, imagine that you had 1,000 interns that you could just throw at a business problem. And in a lot of cases, the AIs can do the work of 1,000 interns. So I want you to look through 20,000 pictures and identify emerging style trends. If you had 1,000 interns, you could do that, but you're not going to hire 1,000 interns to do that. But we're getting to the point with visual recognition software that you can absolutely do that. You can try to figure out trends on hemlines and trends on materials and trends on colors. So one analogy is, imagine that for a pressing business problem that you had, you could throw 1,000 interns at it, and it's not really 1,000 interns, it's actually artificial intelligence software.
That's a great insight.
Yeah.
Peggy?
I mean, one area that I think any CEO can jump into right away is looking at their own workforce. So the CEO may say, I don't have the data on my products or my services, but you can actually use AI to impact your own workforce through workplace analytics. And you can look at how different teams collaborate just by looking at the flow of emails across your company. And so you may say, I had these two products and one was super successful and one wasn't, and I don't quite understand why. And if you look and analyze the data flow, the meetings that were set up and the emails that went between groups, you may see in one, the successful one, there was a lot of interaction, collaboration between engineering and marketing and the research group and the sales group, and it all kind of worked. And the other one, you don't see those links. And so you have actually a set of data as a CEO just within your own walls that you can analyze and sort of boost your productivity by maybe fixing some problems that aren't surfacing until you take a close look at that data.
Right. Isn't there a lot of noise in that system, though, with emails? I mean, there's a lot of, like, do you want to go out and get a sandwich?
There, yeah, there is, and that's why you have to apply the algorithms that'll, hopefully filter out some of that noise and filter out the sandwich noise.
Yeah, I mean, this comes back to the 1,000 interns thing. There is a lot of noise, but an intern could set out the signal from the noise, right? Because humans are able to do that, and so now you could unleash 1,000 interns on it. Here's another, maybe not metaphor, but sort of for people who need a little motivation to start investing in this area, is tell them the Halo hero stories, right? Which is wow, when we did this, we really moved the needle on customer engagement. So here's an example. A sentence that should never come out of a person's mouth once we have AI systems is, in the context of a customer support call, I want to speak with your manager, right? How many times have we ever had that experience? That sentence should never come out of anybody's mouth ever again, because the AIs can predict when a call is going south. When somebody speaks more rapidly, when the emotional content of their word turns to frustration, anger, those types of things, and we can predict all of this in real time now, right? We can take an audio stream and basically say, somebody's getting angry on this call, and we can escalate before they asked for escalation. So who's the hero in customer support who's going to deploy that system and get out in front of all that frustration?
And so the idea is then you give the person to the manager before it escalates?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You can get a manager to sort of listen in on the call and say, hey, I understand that things might not be going well on this call, and I'm here to help.
And one of the things that we've been doing is as we listen in on those calls, you can start to then say, what was the solution that provided the most satisfaction to the customer? And then the next time that call comes in, you still have your customer support person answering the call. The AI can detect, oh, it's that kind of a call. They need this sort of solution. On their screen, they can start to feed up the most likely answers, so they're not looking through their FAQs and trying to find the right spot. You can more instantaneously bring up the satisfaction of the customer on the other side.
Wow, fascinating. Time for one more quick question. Again, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, I'm Jackie Welch, and I run human resources for Freddie Mac out on the East Coast. I have a question for you, Frank. I'm just wondering, given your comments around sort of these 21st century skills that are required for AI to really work, to what degree, if at all, are you seeing this embedded in the business plans of the startups that you have the opportunity to see and vet?
Yeah, so the good news is, look, every startup is an AI startup now. It's kind of unthinkable to fund a company that's not modern with the AI techniques that you're using. And then one of the things that the great startups do to sort of differentiate themselves from just the normal startups or sort of their incumbent competitors is they will become AI-first startups. So let me give you an example. So when we introduced the internet and the internet technology to everybody got a website. So your shopping mall got a website. But there was one huge winner in this space in the United States, and it was called Amazon. And they went all internet native. And being internet native means they updated their website constantly. They updated their prices constantly. They ran A/B tests continuously. The shopping mall didn't do that so much, right? Their website went up, it didn't change for 3 years. So they adopted a new set of habits that made them the winner in the internet age. And what the startups are doing now is they're adopting a new set of habits that will make them winners in the AI age. And to be a winner in the AI age is you're training and upgrading your AI models continuously, rather than, oh, I finished my model, there it is, there's a recommendation. They are thinking about the value of data streams, which is how do I continuously get and label data streams in the course of doing my own business. So here's a great example. Today, most customers, or most big corporations will record their customer support calls. And they do it mostly for liability reasons, because the lawyers want them recorded. That is a magical data set. If you had 1,000 interns, i.e. AI algorithms, that could listen to those calls, you're gonna get product ideas, you're gonna get pricing ideas, you're gonna get things that you never anticipated because you're having thousands of conversations with your customers who are telling you things and you never thought to mine that data. And so the AI-first companies always think that's a data set to be mined rather than just something that the lawyers wanted me to do.
That's great. That's great. Please join me in thanking Peggy and Frank. Fascinating insights. Thank you.